It is my great pleasure as the representative of the Center for Sustainable Human Rights to moderate this workshop. I am Sibahari Gamali, and I'd like to welcome you all. This program is a joint initiative of Metin Memorial Foundation, South Korea, the Asian Human Rights Commission, AHRC, Hong Kong, and Center for Sustainable Human Rights, Nepal. In particular, I would especially like to thank you, Indre, Director of the International Affairs Department of Metin Memorial Foundation, for joining us. It is also our great honor to have with us Mr. Basil Fernando, a well-known jurist, author, and human rights activist throughout the world. In 2014, he was awarded the Right Livelihood Award for his tireless and outstanding work to support and document the implementation of human rights in Asia. It is also a pleasure to welcome Dr. Dinesh Kafle, editor, researcher, and scholar. He has done PhD from JNU and he is currently affiliated with the Kathmandu Post as an opinion page editor, the topmost English newspaper of Nepal. Most of all, I would like to thank all the human rights activists, academics, and journalists who have joined the virtual workshop today. Basically, today's program is divided into three sessions. At first, Indre will deliver her keynote speech on the importance of May 18 Uprising and the campaign for the Universal Day for Prevention of Militarism and Authoritarianism. After the keynote address, paper presentation session will be commenced. We have two presentations today. At first, our special guest speaker, Mr. Basil Fernando, will deliver his speech on the emerging militarism and authoritarianism in Asia. After that, Dr. Dinesh Kafle will present his paper on the significance of the May 18 Uprising in the context of Nepal. Then the third session is for the open discussion. You can put your question in the chat box. There is no need to ask your question in English. And you can ask your question even in Romanized Nepali. After the discussion, we will conclude our virtual workshop. म सुरुमा हाम्रो सबैलाई स्वागत गर्न चाहन्छु र एसियन ह्युमन राइट कमिसन, मे 18 मेमोरियल फाउन्डेसन र सेन्टर फर सस्टेनेबल ह्युमन राइट्स नेपालको संयुक्त आयोजनामा आजको यो कार्यशाला, भर्चुअल कार्यशाला हामी सुरु गरिरहेका छौँ र हामीसँग इन्द्रे यू हुनुहुन्छ, मे 18 मेमोरियल फाउन्डेसनको अन्तर्राष्ट्रिय मामिला विभाग प्रमुख निर्देशक। उहाँ हामीसँग जोडिनु भएकोमा हामी धेरै आभारी छौँ। त्यसै गरी हामीसँग मिस्टर बासिल फर्नान्डो हुनुहुन्छ, दक्षिण एसियाभर नै अलिकति उहाँ चाहिँ मानवाधिकारको क्षेत्रमा सक्रिय हुनुहुन्छ र उहाँ सन् 2014मा राइट लाइभलीहुड अवार्ड, जसलाई एसियाको नोबेल प्राइज पनि भनेर भन्ने गरिन्छ, त्योबाट पनि सम्मानित हुनुभएको थियो। त्यसै गरी हामीसँग डाक्टर दिनेश काफ्ले हुनुहुन्छ। उहाँ चाहिँ जवाहरलाल नेहरू युनिभर्सिटी भारतबाट चाहिँ पिएचडी गर्नुभएको छ र अहिले काठमाडौँ पोस्टमा चाहिँ एडिटरको रूपमा, ओपिनियन पेज एडिटरको रूपमा चाहिँ कार्यरत हुनुहुन्छ र रिसर्चरको रूपमा काम गरिरहनु भएको छ। आजको यो कार्यक्रम हाम्रो 3 भागमा विभाजित छ। पहिलो सेसनमा हामी यु इन्द्रेको किनोट स्पिच सुन्छौँ। त्यसपछि बासिल फर्नान्डोले हामीलाई एसियामा हुर्किँदै गएको, बढ्दै गएको यो सैन्यवाद र अधिनायकवादको बारेमा आफ्नो कार्यपत्र प्रस्तुत गर्नुहुन्छ। त्यसपछि डाक्टर दिनेश काफ्लेले हामीलाई चाहिँ मे 18 मेमोरियल अपरेजिङको नेपालमा सान्दर्भिकताको विषयमा चाहिँ हामीसँग आफ्नो कार्यपत्र प्रस्तुत गर्नुहुनेछ। र तेस्रो सेसनमा हामी ओपन डिस्कसनको सेसन राखेका छौँ। त्यसमा तपाईहरुले हाम्रो कार्यपत्र प्रस्तुतासँग कुनै प्रश्न छ भने त्यसलाई चाहिँ च्याट बक्समा राख्न सक्नुहुनेछ र आफ्ना अरु प्रश्नहरु पनि तपाईले जो आयोजक संस्थालाई पनि कुनै प्रश्न छ भने च्याट बक्समा प्रश्नहरु राख्न सक्नुहुनेछ। हामीले च्याट बक्समा तपाईको यो अनलाइन एटेन्डेन्सको लागि चाहिँ एउटा फर्म पनि तपाईलाई पठाउँछौं र त्यसमा तपाईले आफ्नो उपस्थिति जनाउनु होला र कार्यक्रमको कस्तो लाग्छ तपाईलाई कार्यक्रम, त्यसको पनि प्रतिक्रिया दिनु होला। अहिले समय चाहिँ हाम्रो किनोट स्पिचको लागि भएको छ र यो किनोट स्पिच पछि आजका हाम्रा वक्ता युइन्द्रे चाहिँ हामीसँगबाट बिदा हुनुहुनेछ। Now I would like to invite Indre to make her keynote speech, and the floor is yours, Indre.
Thank you, Mr. Shiba, for the introduction. Hello, my name is Inre Yu. I'm from the May 18 Memorial Foundation in Gwangju, South Korea. It's my great honor to speak to you today. Thank you for the invitation. I really appreciate it. Today, I would like to talk little about the May 18 democratic uprising. In order to understand the uprising, I think one should first know its background. And historians have different views on it, but the most commonly accepted is the assassination of the then President Park Chung-hee by his own intelligence chief Kim Jae-gyu on October 26, 1979. I was 15 then in middle school in a farming village in South Korea. What I cared about during those days were school test scores and pimples that had just begun breaking out on my face. So many things are actually vague in my memory regarding the dictator's deaths. But one thing I clearly remember is that my grandmother immediately began wailing. She was crying so loudly when she heard the news of the dictator's death. So I didn't know about the politics really much. So I naturally thought that my family had some connections, even a far-fetched one, with the president. So, but of course, it turned out there was no family linkage with the dictator. And also I found out what caused my grandmother's that wailing. She believed, as the old generation, the ruler of a country is like a king or the nation's father. It's an episode, but when I remember that, I really don't know whether it is comical or what. Anyway, that's what I remember from that. But it surely ended the 18-year-old dictatorship that had begun with a coup in 1961. This also ended all the schemes the Park had designed to eternalize his power in Korea. And the people's yearning for democracy spread across Korea. But there was a person who took advantage of this power vacuum. Chun Doo-hwan, the then military power holder. He staged a coup and grabbed control of the government. And this enraged the Korean people. And tens of thousands of Koreans, they began flooding cities of South Korea. Among all, Gwangju stood out with its unrelenting struggles against the dictatorship. And then that's when, that was 1979, and it continued to 1980. On May 17, 1980, the government expanded martial law throughout the country. The martial law was put on the country when people started demonstrating against the dictatorship. Under this measure, the National Assembly was dismissed, all universities were closed, and political actions and meetings were all prohibited, and media was heavily censored. The following day, on May 18, Jeonnam University students protested against the school closure, and the martial law army reacted with brutal violence. In support, Gwangju citizens joined the protest. Soldiers got more brutal and suppressed the protesters. They beat and kicked and bludgeoned and bayoneted the citizens, and blood was everywhere. The first shooting by the martial law soldiers occurred on May 20, 2 days later. Witnessing this, citizens were enraged. More and more people joined the downtown rally, and the casualties were severe. The authority cut off electricity, water supplies, and communication facilities to the city. The entire city turned into darkness and was isolated from outside the world. By May 21, the crowd grew much larger in scale, numbering about 300,000 out of the total population of the city, 700,000. They practically poured out of every corner of the city and joined the demonstrations. The troops fired finally at the crowd of people, mass shooting. People dispersed into alleys when the shooting occurred and then regathered to resume protest when the shooting stopped. Citizens also formed citizens' army and continued fighting. They then finally succeeded to expel the martial law army to the city's outskirts by the afternoon of May 21. And beginning May 22 until the 26th, for 5 days, the city formed a community with no police presence, and thus the citizens were in charge of the public domain. They shared food and other necessities and treated and nourished the wounded. When they heard there was a blood shortage, people lined up to donate their blood. And there was an episode that the women working at those night red light facilities, even those women lined up, and they were shouting that maybe our profession is unclear, but our blood is clear. And there's a side story. They donate their blood too. And on May 26th, the citizens received an ultimatum from the army to disarm by midnight. They knew they would die if they stay, but they nonetheless decided not to surrender, but continue fighting. And at 4 o'clock on May 27, the army began to open fire, and soldiers burst into the Cheonnam provincial building where the last fighting was happening. They shot everyone, everything that moved. So in less than 90 minutes, the 10-day struggle came to an end, and the provincial hall, the headquarters of the citizens' army, was handed over to the army. After this happened, after grabbing power, he announced himself the president of the country. And Chun tried various means to manipulate the public to remain in power after this. But the gross power abuse only propelled people to protest. And in the end, his republic was finally overthrown through popular action. Subsequently, in 1988, the first truth unveiling special committee was formed. It was made possible because Roh Tae-woo, his successor, wanted to put some distance from his predecessor in order to gain the political and the moral upper hand. It was a show, though, because at the same time, he, Rotewu, very cunningly, he formed another committee called the May 11 Research Committee. It was in charge of concealing, doctoring, and recreating, distorting the May 18 related documents and all the materials in order to justify the armed crackdown of uprising at the Gwangju hearings afterwards that happened. These forged documents became the source of all the distortions that followed afterwards. The Gwangju Special Committee was faced with confrontation from the start. That means because of this also different interests existing between the political factions. None of the Korean prosecutors nor the American collaborators complied with the investigation process. In the end, the Gwangju Special Committee came to a close without adopting any final report, as well as not reaching any political, legal, and systemic agreement to follow up. It still, though, had a significance as being the first formal investigation done by a constitutional body. And finally, in February 2018, 2 years ago, after 38 years since the uprising, the May 18 Democratic Uprising Truth Unveiling Special Law was enacted. And its committee was to begin its work in September the same year. But the obstruction of political groups with the main opposition party as the leading one, the committee could only begin its work in January this year, 2020, and is still working. It has a 3-year term and 2-year can be extended. So practically we have 5 years to fully divulge the truth of the May 18 democratic uprising. So we are working for the entire truth of the uprising. We also try to commemorate the uprising and the people who sacrificed their lives for democracy in this country during the uprising, and to inherit the May 18 spirit through commemoration projects. This effort began in 1981, the following year of the uprising. It started actually as honoring the victims and the struggles to unveil the uprising's truth, but eventually, after many years, it settled down as a cultural event where citizens unite through street performances, memorial rituals, plays, music festivals, international symposiums, and exhibitions, and more. Surely it offered a very unique cultural asset that can only exist in Gwangju, and soon became a tourist attraction, playing a role in creating a culture for constructing a strong community. And since the May 18 Memorial Foundation was established in 1994, and beginning the following year, the 1995, the May 18 Memorial Foundation has been the representative organization carrying out commemoration projects, such as Gwangju Prize for Human Rights, the May 18 Academy, the Gwangju Prize, Gwangju Asia Forum, the May 18 Press Award, the May 18 Literary Award, the teachers training and exchange programs, scholarship programs, and many more. You can visit our website if you want to know more about our activities. And the May 18 Memorial Foundation has been working to designate May 18 as a universal day for the prevention of militarism and authoritarianism. Since it started in May, with the suggestion of Mr. Basil Fernando, our respected laureate of the Gwangju Prize for Human Rights of 2001, many our overseas individuals and organizations have been working with us to fulfill this goal. And if this is achieved, I believe May 18 will become the symbolic center force for us to gather on every May 18 to encourage each other and strengthen our solidarity in order to continue fighting until we achieve our goal, the democracy. So please spread the UDPMA project to as many people as possible to make it happen. It will be great if we can continue working together in the future to make this happen. Thank you very much again for having me for this opportunity. I really appreciate it. Namaste. Thank you.
म्युट गर्नु अनम्युट गर्नुपर्छ
Thank you, Indri, for your valuable time as well as personal memory of May 18 Uprising and whole history about the May 18 and UDPMA. Now we have Mr. Basil Fernando. I would like to
if anyone has to ask, because Mr. Inde is going to leave, if anyone wants to ask something.
Yeah.
Sorry, I'm going to stay until Mr. Basil finishes his
okay.
speech.
Sure.
Okay. Now I would like to invite Mr. Basil for his speech on emerging militarism and authoritarianism in Asia. Mr. Basil, the floor is for yours. You have 30 minutes.
Okay. Thank you very much. And I like to be with you all and recognize also the Indre's presence. Like the May 18th uprising, you people in Nepal, you had your own uprising. That was the uprising to end the monarchy. In fact, not one, but several uprisings, beginning first in around 1996. And then the last one being, I think, in 2006, which finally brought down a very centuries-old monarchy to an end. So you had a beginning of democracy, although people had no idea of what democracy is. Anyway, it is a great achievement to end the monarchy, which some countries are still trying. For example, Thailand. Still the monarchy and the military together, they rule the place. But there were, in recent times, once again, there were more protests. But in your country, you have settled this problem forever. But the question is that the influence of those days, the monarchy always coexist with the military. So Nepal was governed for centuries on the basis of monarch and the military. And this, long habits are and the mental attitudes, these are, are still present and will be there for some time. It could go away only if the people, a group of people, begin to understand consciously what democracy is, and thereafter try to empower the people to fight for a more vigorous democracy. Influence of militarism is still there in Nepal, and the institutional development is very slow. We know that the adding to this are the questions about people, particularly the poorest people of Nepal. Among them are the Dalits, the people who have been discriminated over a very, very long period. And this is very strong even now in Nepal. People who are in the officialdom and who are running the police, the military, and many other institutions are still carrying the attitudes of an older world where the class domination was dominant. So there are huge challenges facing the Nepalese people in their struggle to grow up to be a dynamic democratic country which most people want to be, but it's a hard task, a difficult task, and a time that will take a long time. So we have lessons to learn from a country like South Korea, which for a very, very long time, it has had a very short periods of democracy earlier. Most of the time, first of all, it was a colony, colonized by the Japanese, a very brutal period of history. Thereafter, there were military dictatorships, but within a very short time, it has been able to develop as a vigorous democracy. In fact, in Asia today, the most dynamic democratic country is South Korea. So we have a lot to learn from this experience, because we are all looking forward to a future of that sort. We want our countries to end the long periods of poverty. At the same time, we want the people's dignity to be respected, and we want working institutions which will protect the rights of the people. The struggle against militarism is not merely an empty slogan. It is a call for replacement of militarized institutions as against democratized institutions at every level. Civil service must be more democratized. The all public services had to be democratized, where there is space for people to participate. System of policing must respect democracy and the rule of law. The judiciary, above all, judiciary should more strongly protect democratic rights. A judiciary that protects the democratic rights is the final guarantee for democracy. And for that, there has to be attitude changes. Ending militarism means also not just a matter of some government change, but ending of attitudes. Now, these attitudes are ingrained attitudes of the old world, repressive world, where inequality was the way, and the suppression of people was considered the right thing to do, and that a citizen had to learn to be silent and to obey and to get whatever the little they can get and to be happy with that. Now, all these things, the consequence of all this, you can see in a situation like now, when you are faced with the COVID-19. In Nepal, numbers have been very large. Numbers of infections, numbers of deaths have been extremely large. And one of the reasons is that the basic health facilities have not developed in the country. Public health systems have not properly developed in the country. Second is that the government do not see it as a priority to invest on doing like tests, providing opportunities for getting tests done for COVID-19, and also to constantly instruct the people about the healthcare and the sanitary and facilities that they should observe in order to ensure their own safety and the safety of others. The dealing with a problem like COVID-19 requires very strong intervention on the part of governments in order to mobilize the people, to keep people on an alert, so that people will not easily, succumb to lethargy and begin to forget about the precautions that they should take. If they forget about the precautions that they should take, then the epidemic will increase. So it requires a leadership. Once again, the leadership will be vigorous if it is democratic, because it will listen to the demand of the people. Essentially, the character of democracy is the ability of governments and willingness of governments to listen to the people, allow room for pressure, legitimate and peaceful pressure, so that by that the governments get to know what the people are experiencing and feeling, and thereby they will do whatever they can to help, and thereby further mobilize the people themselves. You know, the struggle between demoralization and having a high moral sense, high energy and strength to fight is a political factor in when it comes to society. Individually, it's different. It can be psychological or other things, but the morale of a society is a factor relating to the political life. So if the political system demoralizes the people, it does not create them energy to see that if we make an effort, we will progress. Our children will prosper, and we will have safety, we will have health, we will have future. If that is not there, then without the morale, the society cannot push forward. The lasting impact of militarization, either with the together with military or with monarchy or outside, is that it demoralizes the masses of people. It makes repression the law of the country. Everybody lives in a fear of repression. Prisons, the all kinds of deaths, including disappearances, torture, and all kinds of harassments are in the minds of people all the time. So therefore, they are afraid. And with that, it is not possible to fight a strong epidemics like we are experiencing now. It needs cooperation. Cooperation of people can be possible only if the people have self-confidence. if the people believe together we can overcome. Together we can do these things. But military psychology destroy the belief and say don't unite. To unite is something which is adverse because it threatens the militarism. So they must constantly demoralize and divide. So when we are talking about militarization, fight against militarization and authoritarianism, we are talking not merely some external things. We are talking about very fundamental things about psychology, sociology, moral attitudes, the participation, the issues of participation, issues of cooperation, issues of extending support for each other, thereby overcoming purely selfish approaches, and above all, overcoming lethargy. For a place like Nepal and many of the South Asian countries, lethargy is a terrible obstacle to development and progress. Our past, on the one hand, the culture of caste, which has been there for centuries, not centuries, at least for millennium. On the other hand, the lack of democracy, the long periods of monarchy, all these things have created a lethargic attitudes in the people. Lethargy comes from the realization, whatever the effort that I make at the end will not produce something, something for the better. Now this need to be broken, and that is why we need all of us to participate in this process of promoting the Universal Day for against militarization as a moment where we can take and reflect what has militarism done to us. How is it within us still? How its influence is retarding us? How we can do far better if these attitudes are not there, if you are free, if you are able to cooperate with each other with freedom and help each other to overcome and to become a modern people. So it's a very big challenge. It's not just a simple activity, some kind of a project. It's a far more important, work. And I hope that you will look at it from that spirit and participate in this process over the years, not just now and then, but continuously, and thereby make use of this opportunity to become self-conscious about retarding factor caused by militarism and the creative factor that can be created by democracy. These are few reflections. So thank you very much for listening.
It is our great honor to have with us you, Mr. Basil. Thank you very much. We wish for your good health. Thank you. And now I would like to invite Dr. Dinesh Kafle for his presentation. Dr. Kafle, the floor is yours.
Thank you, Shiva. Am I audible? Okay. Thank you. I'd like to begin by thanking the Asian Human Rights Commission, the May 18 Memorial Foundation, and the Center for Sustainable Human Rights for organizing this important program. Thank you, Mr. Basil, Ms. Indre. Thank you, Shiva. Thank you, Prakashji, for inviting me and having me here and letting me talk about Nepal's, how the May 18 day is significant for Nepal also. So this workshop is especially relevant today because we have just got the news that Nepal has slipped 5 positions behind to 92 among the 162 countries in the latest Human Freedom Index, which has been co-published by the Fraser Institute and the Cato Institute. The index is a worldwide ranking of civil, economic and personal freedom, and is an indication of the worsening condition of human rights, free speech, and civic space in Nepal. The May 18 uprising is an important reference point for us in Nepal, as we are still struggling to democratize our politics and the public sphere. So there are many things that we must learn and adopt from the South Korean experience. This year marks the 40th anniversary of the Gwang Uprising that began in South Korea on May 18, 1980 as military authoritarianism in the country. The uprising was a watershed moment for establishing democracy in the Southeast Asian country. Political leaders, intellectuals, writers from Nepal who had been fighting against the autocratic monarchy during the time when the Gwangju movement happened remember Gwangju Uprising as a symbol of people's resistance that helped them think of the struggle, of their own struggle in Nepal as part of a global solidarity against authoritarianism and dictatorship. It was a politically volatile time for all of South Asia, as several countries were straddling between democracy and autocracy at the time. In Nepal, the students' movement and the teachers' movement had been going on, and the fight against autocratic monarchy had entered a decisive phase, almost a third phase in the 1980s. In Pakistan, the people's war against, people's anger actually against Zia-ul Haq's dictatorship was rising after his government executed Zulfikar Ali Bhutto. In India, Indira Gandhi had come back to power after losing elections once after the 1975 emergency. And Bangladesh had been reeling itself under dictatorship with several high-profile assassinations within a decade of the founding of the nation. And in Sri Lanka also, the insurgency was gaining ground, and in 1983 it would enter into a more difficult phase. So the Gwangju Uprising came at a very important juncture in history and remained a blueprint for democratic politics, not only in South Korea, but also across the world. But it was also a tragic moment as well, since the military junta crushed the uprising and killed and injured hundreds of people. The May 18 Memorial Foundation has played a significant role memorializing the uprising and ensuring that the sacrifice of the brave people of Gwangju has not gone in vain. The foundation is, in fact, a role model for a global community of victims to learn how to form solidarity of victims, to engage in a mutual healing process, and to ensure truth, justice, and reconciliation. The aftermath of the uprising, May 18 uprising, is also a blueprint for the continuous struggle for finding truth about killings and disappearances and other forms of gross violence of human rights, and to ensure justice for the victims of the massacre. The idea of justice hinges upon the victims knowing the full truth of the injustice being done to them and their family members, and the process of reconciliation, reparation, and justice. In Nepal, we have not done much work towards ensuring justice for the victims of several cases of human rights abuses, including the insurgency and the fight against the autocratic monarchy from the 60s to the 90s. And even after 2006, when we got our democracy back, we had the Madhya Uprising. Several dozens people were killed, and even after that, we haven't actually talked about forming a commission to a truth and justice commission to ensure reparation and justice for the victims. I'll come back to the point about transitional justice in the Nepalese context in a while, in the second half of this talk. But before that, I'll speak about the latent and manifest forms of militarization in Nepal that have been at the center of Nepal's struggle for democracy and the justice right from the beginning. The history of modern Nepal is around 250 years old. It was King Prithvinarayan Shah, the first king of modern Nepal, who led the foundation of a military organization loyal to the monarchy. In 1762, when Prithvinarayan Shah attacked Kirtipur a third time and claimed victory over it, he ordered that the noses of the locals be chopped off. As many as 865 locals were said to have been the victims of such extreme punitive measures. in a place called Lacheng in the present Nuwakot district. The indigenous Tamang people organized an uprising against the state during the reign of King Rana Bahadur Shah. And in response, the state organized a huge massacre on 2 occasions around 1794, when an estimated 1,000 Tamangs were said to have been killed. After Janga Bahadur Rana became the prime minister of the country through a military coup in 1844, he formed the Vairavnath battalion by admitting Rai and Limbu community people from the eastern part of the country. Not only was a particular community preferred in the military, but the chief of staff, but the chief of army staff was also from the Rana family for almost 119 years. The tradition of the Ranas becoming the chief of army staff continued until 1965, which shows how the foundation of Nepal's military was very pretty much feudal in structure. The Nepalese army has not had to face external challenges after the fight with the British Indian forces in 1816 and the subsequent Sugoi Treaty, except in 1976 when 2 of its battalions had been deployed to control the Khampa rebellion in the Himalayas. But the military has had an unrelenting presence in the Nepalese politics since the very foundation of the state of Nepal. And the image of the Nepalese military is usually projected to be that of a professional institution that looks after the integrity of the national Nepalese territory. But the fact is that throughout the history of modern Nepal, it has been involved in suppression of all kinds of movements and uprisings for social, economic, and political changes, and the protection of the ruling class. So much so that it was used against the first democratically elected Prime Minister of Nepal, B.P. Koirala, who was incarcerated when the king took over during a royal coup in the 1960s. After the re-establishment of parliamentary democracy in 1990, after 30 years of monarchy, autocratic monarchy, the military made serious attempts to stay close to political parties, but some attempts at demilitarization and strengthening of the Nepal police and the establishment of armed police forces have dealt a blow to the relationship between the military and political parties. That led the king and the military to come closer to one another. The military's oppressive character became especially more evident when the government imposed an emergency in 2001 to tackle the Maoist insurgency. This led to an increase in the casualties, not only among the insurgents, but also among the common people as the army had begun indiscriminate killing, kidnapping, and other forms of human rights abuses in the name of counterinsurgency. By taking advantage of the country turning into a militarized state, King Gyanendra organized a royal coup in 2005 with the backing of the military, and he took the country to yet another level of regression. King Gyanendra used the military for political coup and put major political leaders under house arrest and deployed the military in all major media houses in the country, thereby also repressing the freedom of speech in the country. The king's direct rule was removed by the Second People's Movement in 2006. A 19-day movement did not only reinstate the democracy that had been suppressed by the king, but also brought Maoists to the mainstream politics. It also brought the country under the fold of the constitution again and helped remove the 240-year-old monarchy once and for all. Today, the role of the Nepalese army has taken yet another form, that of a business conglomerate. It has become a broker of sorts and is trying to establish itself as a business institution than a professional military institution, as it has been taking business projects ranging from construction of highways to supply of COVID-19 testing kits, from partaking in oppressive schemes of rulers to turning into an ambitious entrepreneurial institution. The military in Nepal is a major case study of what it should not be. If there is any lesson to be learned from the experience of South Korea, especially in regards with the May 18th uprising, it is that the deployment of the military against a dissenting people is detrimental to democratic foundations of the state. If anything, its only contribution is to aggravate the situation and create a condition in which idea of peace, justice, and human rights take a backseat. I'll now come to the point about the need for society to come out of past injustices and build a shared future. This is actually one of the lessons that we learned from the May 18 uprising and its aftermath is that uh, a serious attempt has to be made to institute a Truth and Reconciliation Commission to leave the past behind and move on, because there's no other way than to move ahead, to repair the past and move ahead to build a shared future. And in Nepal, the Comprehensive Peace Accord that was signed after the Maoists came to the mainstream politics agreed to form a high-level truth commission to find out the truth about who committed the gross violations of human rights and were involved in crimes against humanity in the course of the armed conflict, and for creating an environment of reconciliation in the society. However, as the Maoists became entrenched in the parliamentary politics during the transitional period, they began shielding the alleged perpetrators of grave human rights abuses, including the likes of Balkrishna Dhungel, who was an MP, who was convicted of the crimes by the court. Uh, and this eventually brought the idea of transitional justice into question. And the government finally formed two separate commissions to complete the transitional justice process after almost a decade of the signing of the peace accord. The commissions are called the Truth and Reconciliation Commission and the Commission for Investigation of Enforced Disappearances. As per their reports, the Truth Commission has 63,000 cases and the Disappearance Commission has 2,500 cases. Those cases actually have not been looked into as of now. 5 years into the existence, the twin commissions are yet to investigate a single case of human rights abuses. Moreover, the commissions have been lobbying for yet another extension of their terms, even when they have failed to make a headway into the justice process. As of now, what we see is a combination of two diametrically opposite viewpoints that have hindered the progress of the transitional justice process in Nepal. On the one hand, some stakeholders, including the political parties interested to downsize the former Maoist insurgents, claim that there is little room for reconciliation in a wide number of insurgency cases. And on the other hand, the former insurgents seem to be willing to submit themselves to the justice process only when they are assured of mass amnesty. And the challenge now is to find a negotiation between these two extreme viewpoints. 14 years after the peace process began and 5 years after the two commissions were formed, the commissions have been anything but successful in ensuring that the truth about human rights abuses is found and justice served, as they have failed to earn the trust of the most important stakeholders of the conflict, that is the families of the victims and the victims themselves, apart from civil society members and human rights activists. They argue that the commission, rather than addressing the issues of gross violation of human rights, would only provide mass amnesty to the perpetrators. So in transitional Nepal, the Truth Commissions, the Truth Commission and the Commission for the Investigation of Enforced Disappearances have no legitimacy among the victims of the insurgency, whose grievances it is supposed to address. So it is pertinent to consider the case of Nanda Prasad Adhikari when we speak about the status of the transitional justice period in Nepal, and it is actually an exemplary case there. The first case that is Nanda Prasad Adhikari's is the first major case that came into limelight when he sat on a hunger strike along with his wife, demanding the arrest and trial of Maoist leaders who had allegedly murdered his son during the insurgency. Adhikari eventually died in the course of the strike within a year, and his dead body is still kept in a freezer at a hospital in Kathmandu. Adhikari's wife, Ganga Maya Adhikari, is still on a hunger strike 6 years on. The only way in which post-conflict societies can leave their troubled pasts behind and move towards a peaceful future is by giving a definitive closure to the cases of war-era crimes and human rights abuses. And for this, the transitional justice mechanism must ensure that it serves justice and reconciliation, as the case may be. And all the parties involved in the conflict must ensure that such cases do not arise again in the future. But what has happened in Nepal is that the perpetrators are intent upon wiping their crimes altogether and pressurizing the victims into forced reconciliation. This is going to lead us nowhere on the road to peace and recovery, as the wounds are never going to heal. As we commemorate the 40 years of the Guangzhou Uprising, it is important, more important than ever, to emphasize the need primarily for governments across the world to follow the golden rule book of dealing with dissent, de-escalate and demilitarize first, to ensure that dissenting voices are heard and not suppressed, and then move on to the healing process of justice and reconciliation. The May 18 Memorial Foundation, the Asian Human Rights Commission, and the Center for Sustainable Human Rights have continuously reminded us that we must always stand strong against all forms of militarization and authoritarianism. And long after the news cycle has forgotten the incidents of gross violence of human rights, we must all work together towards ensuring that the sacrifices of the victims are memorialized, their dreams fulfilled, and justice served, so that the injustices do not repeat again and again. I thank you all for providing me with this opportunity to speak. And I thank the audience for listening to me. Thank you very much. If you have any questions, please direct that at me. Thank you.
Now I would like to invite Mr. Prakash Mohara, Nepal Desk Chief, Asian Human Rights Commission, to deliver his concluding remarks.
Okay. Yeah, thank you very much, Shivaji, and thank you very much, everyone, for your active participation. I would especially like to thank Ms. Inde. She is not here, but still I like to thank her for a keynote speech, and Mr. Basil and Dinesh for their insightful presentations. We have learned a lot, which can be used during our future work in Nepal and Asia. This kind of discussion must continue to enhance our work in the human rights field, as there is emerging militarism and the trend of authoritarianism has been increasing every day. We must act against such trends collectively. May the spirit of May reach all over the world. I must also thank Namal for his technical support he has provided during this virtual workshop, and Shivaji for moderating the workshop. Thank you all again. Namaste.